The patrol car's siren wailed, a jagged scream slicing through the humid Miami night. But it was the officer's sneer that cut deeper. "Faggots like you don't belong here," he spat, shoving Kyle against the brick wall of the alley, the rough surface scraping his cheek. At 28, Kyle had faced hate before, but this, pinned by a cop, his boyfriend Ezra trembling behind him, felt like a betrayal of everything he'd fought for. Kyle's heart pounded, not from fear, but from a fire igniting within. He'd spent years climbing the ranks of the Miami Police Department, earning his captain's badge through grit and sacrifice, only to be humiliated by one of his own. The officer, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut and a badge reading, "Officer Tate," didn't know Kyle was the new captain assigned to whip his precinct into shape. The irony burned as brightly as the neon lights reflecting off the wet pavement. "Back off, Tate," Kyle said, voice steady despite the pressure on his spine. "You're making a mistake." His green eyes locked onto Tate's, unflinching, even as the cop's grip tightened. Ezra, standing a few feet away, clenched his fists, his warm brown eyes blazing with a mix of fear and fury. The air crackled with tension, the distant hum of South Beach nightlife a cruel contrast to the violence unfolding in the shadows. Tate laughed, a low, mocking sound. "Mistake? You're the one prancing around, disrespecting the badge." He shoved Kyle harder, then turned his glare to Ezra. "And you, pretty boy, better run before I book you both for public indecency." The accusation was baseless. Kyle and Ezra had only been holding hands, walking home from a date at a beachfront cafe, but truth didn't matter to Tate. His hatred did. Kyle's mind raced. He could reveal his rank now, pull the captain card, and watch Tate's smug face collapse. But something held him back. He wanted to understand this man, this officer who wore the same uniform Kyle had sworn to honor. Was Tate just a bully with a badge, or was there more beneath the surface? Kyle had seen too many good cops go astray, warped by pressure or pain. He needed to know before he acted. Ezra stepped forward, his voice shaking but defiant. "You don't get to do this. We're not breaking any laws." His courage, despite the tremor in his hands, sent a surge of pride through Kyle. Ezra, a graphic designer with a gentle soul and a fierce heart, had always been his anchor. They'd met 2 years ago at an art gallery opening, bonding over a shared love of bold colors and quiet moments. Now, facing Tate's aggression, Ezra's strength reminded Kyle why he fought for a better world. Tate's eyes narrowed, his hand twitching toward his baton. "You want to talk back?" "Big mistake." He stepped toward Ezra, but Kyle moved faster, positioning himself between them. "Touch him, and you'll regret it," Kyle said, his tone low and lethal. Tate froze, surprised by the steel in Kyle's voice. For a moment, the alley was silent, save for the distant crash of waves. Then Tate smirked, stepping back. "You're lucky I'm off duty soon, but I'll be watching you." He jabbed a finger at Kyle, then sauntered back to his patrol car, leaving the couple in the dim glow of a flickering streetlight. Ezra exhaled, rushing to Kyle's side. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his hands gently cupping Kyle's face. Kyle nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, already planning his next move. The precinct was a powder keg, and Kyle's arrival as captain was meant to defuse it. Miami's District 7 had a reputation, corruption scandals, low morale, and a culture of unchecked aggression. Kyle had been handpicked to turn it around, his record of integrity and leadership making him the top choice. But this encounter with Tate wasn't just personal, it was a glimpse into the rot he'd been sent to fix. Back at their apartment, a cozy loft overlooking the ocean, Kyle sat on the balcony, staring at the horizon. Ezra joined him, handing him a glass of iced tea. "You didn't tell him who you are," Ezra said, his voice soft but probing. "Why?" Kyle sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Because I need to see how deep this goes. If I'm going to change this precinct, I have to understand it first." Ezra nodded, his fingers brushing Kyle's. "Just be careful. That guy's dangerous." Kyle squeezed Ezra's hand, the warmth grounding him. "I will, but I'm not letting him, or anyone, hurt us." His resolve hardened, a promise to himself and Ezra. Tomorrow, he'd walk into the precinct as Captain Kyle Brennan, and Officer Tate would face a reckoning he never saw coming. The next morning, Kyle stood before the precinct's briefing room, his captain's badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The room buzzed with chatter, officers sizing up the new guy. Tate lounged in the back, smirking, oblivious to the storm about to hit. Kyle's heart raced, but his face was a mask of calm authority. He'd been bullied, humiliated, and underestimated before. Today, he'd turn that pain into power. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kyle began, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "I'm Captain Kyle Brennan, your new commanding officer. We're here to serve and protect, not to intimidate or divide." His eyes locked onto Tate's, a silent challenge. The officer's smirk faltered, confusion flickering in his gaze. Kyle stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. "And some of you," he said, pausing for effect, "have a lot to learn about what that means." The room fell silent, every eye on Kyle. He could feel the weight of their scrutiny, their doubts, their fears. But he also felt the fire in his chest, the same fire that had carried him through years of prejudice and struggle. This was his precinct now, and he'd make it a place where justice meant something, for everyone. Tate's confusion morphed into a scowl as Kyle's words hung in the air. The briefing room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of unspoken tensions. Kyle scanned the faces before him, some curious, some wary, a few openly hostile. He knew turning this precinct around wouldn't be easy, but Tate's presence made it personal. "Officer Tate," Kyle said, his voice calm but laced with steel, front and center. The room froze. Tate hesitated, then swaggered forward, his broad frame radiating defiance. Up close, Kyle saw the details he'd missed in the alley. A faint scar above Tate's eyebrow, eyes that flickered with something unreadable. Anger, maybe, or shame. "You're with me today?" Kyle continued. "Field training. Let's see how you uphold the badge." Whispers rippled through the room. Tate's jaw tightened, but he nodded, his smirk a thin veil over his unease. Kyle dismissed the others, assigning routine patrols, then led Tate to a small office. The door clicked shut, and the air grew thick. "Last night," Kyle said, leaning against the desk, "you assaulted a civilian. Care to explain?" Tate's eyes widened, recognition dawning. "That was you." His voice cracked, betraying a flicker of panic. "I didn't know." Kyle raised a hand, cutting him off. "You don't get to hide behind ignorance. You targeted me and my partner because of who we are. That's not policing. That's abuse." Tate shifted, his bravado crumbling. "I was just enforcing order," he muttered, but the words sounded hollow. Kyle studied him, searching for a crack in the armor. "Order? By slamming me against a wall. By threatening my boyfriend." His voice rose, sharp with controlled anger. "You're supposed to protect, Tate, not terrorize." Tate looked away, his hands clenching. For a moment, Kyle thought he saw guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. The day's training was grueling. Kyle paired Tate with him on patrol, watching his every move. They cruised through Miami's vibrant streets, past pastel-colored buildings and bustling markets. Tate was competent, quick on his feet, sharp with procedure, but his interactions with civilians were cold, mechanical. When a young man flagged them down for help with a stolen bike, Tate's dismissive tone made Kyle's blood boil. "Step it up," Kyle snapped. "That kid deserves respect, not your attitude." By noon, they stopped at a food truck for lunch. Kyle ordered tacos, handing one to Tate, who took it grudgingly. "Why are you doing this?" Tate asked, his voice low. "You could have reported me last night. Why drag it out?" Kyle chewed thoughtfully, the spice of the taco grounding him. "Because I believe in second chances. But you've got to earn it." The afternoon brought a call to a domestic disturbance in a quiet neighborhood. Kyle let Tate take the lead, observing. The situation was tense, a couple arguing loudly, neighbors watching from their porches. Tate approached with his usual bravado, barking orders, but Kyle stepped in, de-escalating with calm questions and empathy. The couple calmed, and the situation resolved without cuffs. Tate watched, silent, his expression unreadable. Back in the patrol car, Kyle broke the silence. "That's how you build trust, Tate. Not with force, but with understanding." Tate stared out the window, his fingers drumming on the door. "You don't get it," he said finally. "This job, it hardens you. You see the worst in people." Kyle shook his head. "That's no excuse. We're here to see the best, too." That evening, Kyle returned home to Ezra, who was sketching at their dining table, surrounded by colored pencils. The sight of him, focused, beautiful, alive, eased the day's weight. "How was it?" Ezra asked, looking up. Kyle sighed, sinking into a chair. Tate's a mess, but there's something there. Maybe he's not a lost cause. Ezra reached for his hand. You're too good, Kyle. Not everyone deserves your patience. Kyle smiled, but his mind lingered on Tate. He'd seen the flicker of doubt in the officer's eyes, a hint of conflict beneath the bravado. Was it enough to change him? Kyle wasn't sure, but he'd been given chances in life, by mentors, by Ezra, and he believed in paying it forward. Still, he couldn't shake the memory of Tate's cruelty, the way it had made Ezra tremble. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but Kyle knew it was the only way to break the cycle. The next day, Kyle pushed Tate harder. They responded to a protest downtown, a crowd demanding justice for a recent police shooting. The air was electric, signs waving, voices chanting. Tate tensed, his hand hovering near his holster, but Kyle shot him a warning look. Talk to them, Kyle said. Listen. Tate scoffed but approached a protester, a young woman with a megaphone. Her words were sharp, accusing, but Tate listened, his face tight. When he responded, his tone was gruff but not hostile, a small step. By the end of the week, Kyle saw glimpses of change. Tate was still rough, still guarded, but he followed Kyle's lead, asking questions instead of issuing threats. During a community outreach event, Tate even helped a kid with a basketball, earning a shy smile. Kyle watched, hope flickering. Maybe, just maybe, he could mold Tate into the cop this city needed. But hope was fragile. That night, Kyle received an anonymous tip. Tate had been seen at a bar, bragging about teaching queers a lesson. The words hit like a punch, unraveling the progress Kyle thought they'd made. He sat on the balcony, Ezra asleep inside, and stared at the ocean. Tomorrow, he'd confront Tate. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about the soul of the precinct, and Kyle wouldn't let hate win. The precinct was quiet at dawn, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the empty desks. Kyle sat in his office, the anonymous tip burning in his mind like a live wire. Tate's words, bragging about teaching queers a lesson, echoed, each syllable a betrayal of the trust Kyle had tentatively offered. He called Tate in before the morning briefing. The officer entered, his usual swagger muted, sensing the shift in Kyle's demeanor. Sit, Kyle said, his voice clipped. Tate obeyed, his eyes wary. Kyle leaned forward, hands clasped on the desk. I heard you were at a bar last night, mouthing off about teaching queers a lesson. Care to explain? Tate's face paled, but he recovered quickly, his jaw tightening. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice flat. Kyle's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me, Tate. I'm giving you a chance to come clean. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Tate shifted, then muttered. It was just talk. Bar talk. Didn't mean anything. Kyle's anger flared, but he kept it in check. Words have power, Tate. You think that kind of talk doesn't spread? Doesn't hurt? He stood, pacing to the window. You assaulted me and my partner. I gave you a shot to prove you're better than that. And this is how you repay it. Tate looked down, his hands clenched. For the first time, Kyle saw a crack, guilt, raw and unfiltered. I grew up in a place where people like you were the enemy, Tate said, his voice low. My dad, my brothers, they drilled it into me. Weakness wasn't allowed. Being different wasn't allowed. He paused, swallowing hard. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's how I was raised. Kyle turned, his green eyes piercing. Your past doesn't justify your actions. You're a cop. You chose this job. You don't get to pick and choose who deserves your protection. Tate nodded, barely, his shoulders slumping. Kyle sat back down. You're on probation. One more incident, and you're out. But I'm not done with you. You're going to learn what it means to serve. The day was relentless. Calls piled up, from petty thefts to a heated dispute at a local gym. Kyle kept Tate close, watching his every move. During a call to a homeless shelter, Tate hesitated when a trans woman approached, her voice shaky as she reported harassment. Kyle stepped in, listening patiently, ensuring her safety. Tate watched, silent, but later asked, How do you do that? Just talk to everyone like they're the same? Kyle glanced at him, surprised by the question. Because they are, Tate. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's got pain. Our job is to see that, not add to it. Tate nodded, his expression thoughtful, but Kyle wasn't fooled. Words were cheap. Actions mattered. That evening, Kyle met Ezra at a small jazz club, the music a soothing balm after the day's tension. Ezra's smile was a lighthouse, guiding Kyle back to himself. "You're carrying the world again," Ezra said, brushing a strand of hair from Kyle's forehead. Kyle sighed, sipping his drink. "Tate's not just a bully. He's a product of something bigger. I want to believe he can change," but he trailed off, doubt creeping in. Ezra leaned closer, his voice soft. "You can't save everyone, Kyle, but you're giving him a chance most wouldn't. That's who you are." Kyle kissed Ezra's hand, gratitude swelling in his chest. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he whispered. Ezra grinned. "Probably get into more trouble." The next day, Kyle assigned Tate to a community sensitivity training session, a mandatory program for officers with disciplinary issues. Tate bristled but attended, sitting stiffly as a facilitator discussed bias and inclusion. During a break, Kyle overheard Tate talking to another officer, his tone defensive but curious. "I don't get it," Tate said. "Why's it matter so much? Live and let live, right?" The other officer shrugged, but Kyle saw an opening, a spark of willingness to question. Over the next week, Kyle pushed Tate to engage with the community. They visited a youth center, where Tate awkwardly joined a group of teens playing cards. One kid, a shy boy with a rainbow pin on his backpack, opened up about being bullied. Tate listened, his face unreadable, but he didn't dismiss the kid's pain. Later, he asked Kyle, "That kid, he's like you, isn't he?" Kyle nodded. "And like thousands of others. They just want to be seen." Friday brought a crisis. A hate crime reported in a neighborhood bar. Kyle and Tate arrived to find a shattered window and shaken patrons. Kyle took statements, his calm presence steadying the crowd. Tate hung back, watching, but when a young man broke down, sobbing about feeling unsafe, Tate stepped forward. "We'll find who did this," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. Kyle raised an eyebrow, surprised. Back at the precinct, Kyle pulled Tate aside. "That was good work today. You showed up for those people." Tate shrugged, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of pride. "Just doing the job," he said. Kyle nodded, hiding a smile. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was progress. At home, Kyle and Ezra cooked dinner, the kitchen filled with laughter and the scent of garlic. As they danced to a slow song, Kyle felt the weight of the week lift. Tate was a challenge, but Kyle was starting to see the man beneath the hate. Change was slow, messy, but possible. And as long as Ezra was by his side, Kyle knew he could face anything. The precinct buzzed with rumors, a low hum of gossip trailing Kyle like a shadow. Word of his confrontation with Tate had spread, and officers whispered about the gay captain taking on the precinct's toughest bully. Kyle ignored the stares, focusing on the stack of reports on his desk, but the weight of their judgment pressed against him. Tate, meanwhile, was a puzzle. Since the bar incident, he'd been quieter, more attentive, but Kyle sensed a storm brewing. During a patrol in Little Havana, Tate handled a noise complaint with surprising restraint, listening to an elderly woman's concerns without his usual edge. Kyle nodded approvingly, but his guard stayed up. Trust was earned, not given. Midweek, a new case hit. A string of assaults targeting gay men near Ocean Drive. The pattern was clear: late nights, secluded spots, victims too scared to report until now. Kyle briefed the team, his voice steady but urgent. "These are our people," he said, meeting every officer's gaze. "We protect them. No excuses." Tate's eyes lingered on Kyle, a question in them, but he said nothing. They hit the streets, canvassing bars and clubs. Kyle noticed Tate's discomfort in the vibrant neighborhood, his shoulders tense as drag queens and couples passed by. But when a victim, a young man with a bruised face, recounted his attack, Tate listened intently, asking gentle follow-up questions. Kyle watched, a flicker of hope igniting. Maybe Tate was starting to get it. That night, Kyle and Ezra attended a fundraiser for an LGBTQ youth shelter. Ezra, radiant in a tailored blazer, worked the room, charming donors with his warmth. Kyle stood back, pride swelling as he watched his partner shine. But his thoughts drifted to Tate. The officer's past words, his cruelty in the alley, clashed with the man Kyle saw emerging. Could someone unlearn hate? The next day, Kyle paired Tate with Officer Lopez, a veteran with a sharp mind and no tolerance for nonsense. They responded to a call about a fight at a beachfront bar. When they arrived, a drunk patron was shouting slurs, swinging at a waiter. Tate moved in, restraining the man with minimal force, his voice calm but firm. Lopez raised an eyebrow at Kyle. "He's learning," she whispered. Kyle nodded, but doubt lingered. At the precinct, Kyle found a note slipped under his door. Watch your back, Captain. Not everyone's on your side. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the threat vague, but chilling. Kyle's stomach twisted. Was it Tate? Someone else? The precinct's old guard resented his reforms, and his identity made him a target. He tucked the note away, resolving to stay vigilant. Ezra noticed his tension that evening. Over dinner at their favorite taco joint, he reached across the table, his touch grounding. What's wrong? He asked. Kyle hesitated, then showed him the note. Ezra's face darkened. You need to report this, Kyle. This isn't just about you. It's about everyone you're trying to protect. Kyle nodded, but his mind was on Tate. Was he a threat, or a man caught in his own battles? The next morning, Kyle confronted Tate. Did you leave this? He asked, holding up the note. Tate's eyes widened, genuine shock crossing his face. No, Captain. I swear. Kyle studied him, searching for a lie, but found none. Then prove it, Kyle said. Help me find who did. Tate nodded, a spark of determination in his eyes. They dove into the assault case, tracking leads to a dive bar known for shady dealings. Tate took point, questioning the bartender with a newfound confidence. The man revealed a name, Rico, a local thug with a history of hate crimes. Kyle and Tate staked out Rico's haunt, a rundown motel. As they waited, Tate spoke, his voice low. I was wrong, that night in the alley. I'm trying to be better. Kyle glanced at him, surprised. Why the change? He asked. Tate sighed, staring at the motel's flickering sign. My brother, he came out last year. My family disowned him. I didn't get it then, but seeing you, hearing those victims, it's making me question everything. Kyle nodded, a mix of empathy and caution in his chest. Keep questioning, he said. That's where growth starts. The stakeout paid off. Rico appeared, and they moved in, arresting him without incident. Back at the precinct, the mood lifted, the team celebrating a win. Tate lingered after the briefing, approaching Kyle. I want to do more, he said. Community work, like you do. Kyle studied him, then nodded. Start with the youth center. They need volunteers. That night, Kyle and Ezra walked along the beach, the waves a soothing rhythm. You think Tate's for real? Ezra asked. Kyle shrugged, the note still heavy in his pocket. I hope so, but I'm not betting on it yet. Ezra squeezed his hand. You're doing good, Kyle. Don't forget that. Kyle smiled, the stars above a reminder that some battles were worth fighting. The precinct was a pressure cooker, the anonymous threat lingering like smoke. Kyle doubled down on reforms, implementing mandatory bias training and stricter oversight. Some officers embraced the changes, others grumbled, their resentment palpable. Tate, though, was a wild card, showing flashes of growth but still shadowed by his past. Kyle assigned Tate to the youth center, hoping community work would solidify his progress. They arrived at the center, a colorful building filled with laughter and chaos. Teens swarmed, some wary of Tate's uniform. A boy named Jamie, the one with the rainbow pin, approached Kyle. He's the guy from the alley, isn't he? He whispered. Kyle nodded, keeping his voice low. He's trying to change. Help him see why it matters. Tate struggled at first, awkward with the kids, but Jamie challenged him to a game of hoops. Tate loosened up, laughing as he missed a shot. Kyle watched, a cautious hope growing. Maybe Tate could unlearn his hate, one connection at a time. But the note gnawed at Kyle. Someone in the precinct was watching, waiting. A new lead in the assault case pulled Kyle and Tate back to the streets. A witness reported seeing Rico with an accomplice, a cop. The revelation hit Kyle like a freight train. Corruption in his precinct wasn't new, but a cop targeting gay men? That was personal. Kyle kept Tate close, unsure if he was ally or suspect. They interviewed victims, piecing together descriptions. The accomplice was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar, too close to Tate's profile. Kyle's stomach churned, but he stayed professional, questioning Tate about his off-duty hours. Tate's answers were steady, his alibi solid, but doubt lingered. I'm not that guy anymore, Tate said, his voice earnest. Kyle wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Ezra sensed Kyle's strain, pulling him into a quiet moment at home. They sat on the balcony, the ocean breeze cool against their skin. You're tearing yourself apart, Ezra said, his brown eyes searching Kyle's. You can't carry this alone. Kyle leaned into him, the weight of the precinct, the note, the case pressing down. I have to fix this, he whispered. For us. For everyone. The next day, Kyle dug into precinct records, searching for clues. He found irregularities, unlogged overtime, vague reports, linked to Officer Daniels, a veteran with a grudge against Kyle's reforms. Daniels matched the accomplice's description. Tall, scarred, angry. Kyle's pulse quickened. Was Daniels the threat? The accomplice? He confronted Daniels in the locker room, keeping his tone even. I know about the assaults. I know about Rico. Daniels sneered, his scar twitching. You're out of your depth, Captain. This precinct doesn't need your kind. The words stung, but Kyle pressed on. If you're involved, I'll find out. Daniels stormed off, leaving Kyle with more questions than answers. Tate, meanwhile, was thriving at the youth center. Jamie opened up about his struggles, and Tate listened, sharing a story about his brother's coming out. I was a jerk to him, Tate admitted. I'm trying to make it right. Kyle overheard, his heart torn between pride and suspicion. Was Tate's change genuine or a cover? A breakthrough came that night. A victim identified Daniels in a photo lineup, linking him to the assaults. Kyle mobilized a sting, setting up surveillance at Rico's motel. Tate volunteered, his eyes fierce. Let me prove myself, he said. Kyle nodded, but kept a close watch. If Tate was clean, this was his chance. If not, Kyle would end him. The sting was tense, the motel bathed in neon glow. Rico met Daniels, exchanging cash for a bag. Kyle and Tate moved in, cuffs ready. Daniels resisted, shouting slurs, but Tate subdued him, his movements swift and sure. As Daniels was hauled away, Tate met Kyle's gaze. I'm not him, he said. Kyle nodded, a weight lifting, but the note still burned in his pocket. At home, Ezra wrapped Kyle in a hug. You're making a difference, he said. Kyle smiled, but his mind raced. Daniels was down, but the threat felt unresolved. Someone else was out there, watching. Kyle kissed Ezra, vowing to protect him, the precinct, and the fragile hope Tate represented. The fight wasn't over, not yet. Daniels' arrest sent shockwaves through the precinct, exposing a fracture that ran deeper than Kyle had feared. Officers whispered, some relieved, others defensive, loyal to the old guard. Kyle stood firm, his reforms gaining traction, but the anonymous note haunted him. Was Daniels the author, or was someone else still lurking? Tate was different now, his swagger replaced by a quiet resolve. He spent evenings at the youth center, mentoring Jamie and others. Kyle watched, pride mingling with caution. Tate's growth was real, but the scars of that night in the alley lingered. Forgiveness was a choice, not a feeling, and Kyle was still choosing. A final piece of the assault case surfaced, a hidden camera at the motel, capturing Daniels' deals with Rico. The footage cleared Tate, showing he'd never been involved. Kyle called him in, the tape paused on his laptop. You're clean, Kyle said. Tate exhaled, relief flooding his face. Thank you, Captain, for believing I could change. Kyle leaned back, studying him. You've got a long way to go, but you're on the right path. Keep showing up for those kids. Tate nodded, a faint smile breaking through. I will. And I'm sorry for that night. I was wrong. Kyle held his gaze, then nodded. Apology accepted. Now prove it every day. The note's mystery unraveled when Kyle found a match in precinct logs, an officer's sloppy handwriting on a report, identical to the threat. It wasn't Daniels, but Officer Harris, a quiet veteran who'd resented Kyle's rise. Confronted, Harris confessed, his anger rooted in fear of change. Kyle suspended him, but offered a path to redemption. Community service, like Tate. Hate doesn't win here, Kyle said. Not anymore. The precinct began to shift. Officers embraced Kyle's vision, attending trainings, engaging with the community. Tate became a regular at the youth center, his bond with Jamie a testament to change. One evening, Kyle and Ezra visited, watching Tate laugh with the teens. Ezra squeezed Kyle's hand. You did this, he whispered. Kyle shook his head. We did this. Months later, the precinct hosted a community fair, a celebration of unity. Kyle stood on a stage, Ezra by his side, addressing a crowd of officers, residents, and kids like Jamie. We're here to protect everyone, Kyle said, his voice carrying over the cheers. No exceptions. Tate, in the crowd, clapped, his eyes bright with purpose. That night, Kyle and Ezra walked along the beach, the moon casting silver ripples on the water. You changed a precinct, Ezra said, his voice warm. Kyle smiled, pulling him close. And you changed me. They kissed, the world fading away, leaving only love and the promise of a better tomorrow. The fight hadn't been easy. Hate, fear, and doubt had tested Kyle at every turn. But standing there, with Ezra's hand in his, Kyle knew it was worth it. He'd turned pain into purpose, bullying into growth, and a broken precinct into a beacon of hope. Tate's journey wasn't over, but neither was Kyle's. Together, they'd keep building a world where love won, no matter who you were.